Uncle Barney. You know, I had given a speech not too long ago, and I think I was in Colorado. Somebody said they were from Colorado. And I put that picture of Barney up, and believe it or not, just a week earlier, the guy that's in the Barney's costume had got arrested for some deviant type acts. So like, we're like, listen, Chris, you've got to get this on your presentation. And I didn't actually believe him, but it is the case. You want to turn the lights up just a little bit in the back, Nick? All right, guys, so first of all, thank you very much for being here. My name is Chris Foltz, and you know, I have an interesting profession because nobody knows what it is. It took me about 31 years to figure it out, but ultimately I'm going to tell you my story so you can understand where I come from. So I'm a social impact strategist, which means that I like to help brands change the world. Now, there are some people in the room that are doing it right now. I watched your videos last night, very impressed what you're doing. One person I want to draw attention to is Chef Bruno Serrato, who's here today. He's one of my personal heroes. And I can tell you how important this person's been in my life. I've been following before CNN said he was a hero, before CNN said he was a top hero. But this gentleman right here, I come from an Italian family. And when I grew up in an Italian family, it was it's one of those things that you cook neck bone. You know, it's leftovers. I'm a Sicilian Italian family, so it's a little bit even more different, as Bruno could probably tell you. But the truth of the matter is, it's all about doing things that actually make a difference with no expectation of reward. And I'll tell you a little bit about what Bruno does later, but you're going to understand why this is so important and how your brand grows from it. So I started my career in politics, okay? Now, I don't know, has anybody here ever worked in politics at all? All right, well, let me tell you about that. I started my career in Republican Party politics. Now, it's an interesting party, for sure. My uncle was a big lobbyist, the Brady Bill, guns, everything of that nature. So I got involved in Congress by the time I was 14. I was a volunteer. 16, I worked in Congress. And then by the time I was 18, I got a job with Elizabeth Dole. She used to be the president of the American Red Cross, and she decided that seems like the United States, so she was going to run for president of the United States. So I joined her campaign, and a gentleman by the name of Ari Fleischer was her campaign director. Ultimately, Ari left the campaign and went over to George W. Bush's campaign, where I got my job when I was 19 years old. So ultimately, I moved myself all the way up to the national director position of the College Republicans. Now, when you guys go to college, you know which people are College Republicans on campus. Generally the ones everybody hates, and it's a very interesting group. But the truth of the matter is, I was never really a conservative. I was never really a Republican. I was just the person they put in charge of it. So after I started working with the president, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of great people, Tom Brokaw, all the major leaders in the Republican Party and in the media. It's actually a fairly interesting group of people. Governor Tom Ridge, he was the first Homeland Security Director. And if you notice, the most interesting part is I have blonde highlights in my hair, Newt Gingrich. So I was a bit in a personal crisis in my life at that point, I guess. Ed Rendell, governor of Pennsylvania. These are all great people, which ultimately started my career. But no matter which way you look at it, I ended up here. This is the county jail, where I spent 119 days. I'm going to tell you how this happened. So basically, between the age of 19 and 24, every political race in America that we're all upset about a little bit now are the ones that I was in charge of back then. I did Arnold Schwarzenegger out by you. I did the governor of Mississippi's race, 2 George W. Bushes, and ultimately my mother got cancer. Now, I don't know, I'm sure oftentimes you guys have faced cancer in your life, but you know, I'm from an Italian family. We're really tight. And I was raised by the women in my Italian family. So right away, it doesn't matter where you're at in life, you work for the president, it doesn't matter. I came home and moved into my mother's basement to help her with cancer. And I had my wisdom teeth pulled out in the first week. And although that doesn't hurt, they definitely give you 2 months worth of Vicodin. So I just did the 2 months worth of Vicodin in 2 weeks. I saw the 2 in there and I just kind of jumped to conclusions. But no matter which way you look at it, 2 things happen when you do that much Vicodin in a short period of time. You either die or you become addicted. And luckily I became addicted because otherwise I wouldn't be here today. And one of the big challenges was that, you know, Vicodin is a prescription drug. You can only get it so much. So I graduated to Oxycontin. Then it got to the point where I was snorting $300 a day of heroin. All right? Now, I don't know how to put this in perspective, but if you guys, anybody in this room did $10 of heroin right now, you would die. $300 a day. Now, I don't care if you're Bill Gates, you don't have enough money to do that. And so for the next 9 months, I'm a full addict in my mother's basement. And the only thing that stopped me was my mother dying, okay? And I remember it like it was yesterday, even through the cloud and the haze of drug addiction, my mom and I were very close. And the day after her funeral, our judge, who I helped get elected years prior, said, listen, the exact words were, we are not putting up with this bullshit anymore, Chris. So they put a $250,000 warrant out for me to go to jail rehab. They know I'd never go to private rehab facilities. I would never get my life together. So I moved into jail, and ultimately for the next 119 days, I was in this tier. There would be 4 people to a room that was literally the size of 2 of these tables together, but you learn a lot about life when you're in jail. Now, the only thing that was a real big issue about this is not so much what was going on inside of jail, but on the outside. My mother's house was foreclosed upon. Everything I owned in my entire life was literally thrown away. And I came out homeless. I had nothing. I had the winter outfit I wore in. And mind you, just a year earlier, I was working for the President of the United States. So it doesn't necessarily matter where you were at, it's where you're at now. So the big issue that I had was when I got out, I'm homeless. So the option is that either I live on the streets, but luckily enough, the court system mandated that I move into almost like a halfway house in the Chicago suburbs called an Oxford house. Now, one thing I realized very simple is in America, we spend all of our time celebrating victories. How many downloads we have on an application, how much money we raised in the foundation, how many meals we've served at our restaurant. But I can promise you this, guys. Life is not necessarily about victories and the celebration of them. It's about reacting to failures. And the only reason I'm standing here versus sitting down there is I've reacted to my failures just slightly different than most people. So, what do? People often ask that. I partner with brands, thought leaders, and centers of influence for one reason and one reason only. I'm in the business of changing the world. And when I say that, it seems like a fairly broad term, and I'm going to show you today how your brands have the ability to change the world, and the exhaust of this is growing the revenues, opening new restaurants, getting more foundation donations, but more or less, all that really matters to me is making an impact. I want to change the way people think. So how do we do this? Well, a lot of you guys know a gentleman that's here this weekend. About a year and a half ago, I had a meeting with somebody, and he said, Chris, I follow what you do, I love what you do. What do you know about collaborative capitalism? So I'm like, what is this guy talking about? I mean, you guys might know who it is, our friend Bernie Dorby. So he sits down, he's like, Bernie's an interesting guy, right? I mean, everybody knows this. I mean, you don't know what to think. It's kind of like meeting God, an Illuminati member, a robot, and an absolutely most amazing person on earth, all at the same time. So you're going to listen regardless of what he said. But I understand what capitalism is, but I didn't know what collaborative capitalism is. So I spent the next year of my life traveling the world, trying to figure out what would be a case study of this. What is an idea? What is something that actually is a proven concept in collaborative capitalism? And the brands that I would fall on are people like Bruno and his restaurant out there, doing things positive for the world, but again, still having a business that makes money, because you can't do positive things without money in the world that we live in. So it's okay to make money in a nonprofit capacity, because ultimately, no matter what, you're doing something to move the needle forward. So after that year, I came back and I figured out that there's an industry out there that exists. And I actually found it in Europe. Europe was a leader in this particular capacity. But I develop and create what we call as social enterprises. Anybody ever heard of social enterprise before? Okay, where are you from? What state?
Yeah.
Okay, we're
Chicago.
Okay, you're Chicago, so we have laws in there. What about you?
New Zealand.
Okay, New Zealand. You guys are actually leaders. Finland, New Zealand, Australia, you guys were social enterprise leaders at the beginning. European Union bloc, etc. Easiest way to describe social enterprise is this. It's a for-profit business that has a mission, and part of their mission is to change the world or make it better. See, to me, guys, it's not even cool anymore to be the #1 person in your industry. I've got a 16-year-old client that's the #1 in his industry, okay? What is cool is changing your industry forever. Because when you change your industry forever, it actually changes the world every little bit from your own corner. So it's not far of a stretch for you to realize that you can do it. So one of the things, I'm a graduate professor of business in Chicago, and everybody has their own philosophies, and I call it CORE. CORE is simply an acronym, and I truly believe, I have a book coming out later this year called Core Brand Values. But if you follow the equation that I'll put up here right now, it's literally impossible for you not to have success with your brands. And how I know this is because I started my business with $140, being a felon, being a drug addict, going to jail, and what seems to be the hated the most, working for George W. Bush. Okay, they actually, it's so funny, I was going for a radio interview, and I'm talking about felonies and drug addictions, and every single time, but you worked for George W. Bush. Matter of fact, I tried volunteering for the Democratic Party in Chicago, the most democratic state in America, and they would not let me, because although the president was out of office for 2 years at that point, George W. Bush, they thought I was an implant trying to steal information for the Republican Party. So we wonder why we cannot get anything done in America, because that's the kind of nonsense that happens behind closed doors. First thing, CORE is an acronym. The first thing in there is concept. Okay, everybody's got concepts. Bruno's got a restaurant, all of us have brands. What is your concept?
I build carbon monoxide alarms.
You build carbon monoxide alarms. Boy, do I got the hookup for you, man. We'll talk about that later, but that's your concept, right? So who here has a problem identifying what their concept is? This is a very interesting question because a lot of us have 50, 60, 70 concepts. I asked this guy right here, I'm like, what do you do for a living? He's like, what was the actual word you said? You said digital media? Was that what it was? Okay, so then you have different verticals. You have online ads, you have signage, you have all sorts of things, correct? So those are all concepts under a brand. But one of the biggest challenges that we face in America is a lot of people oftentimes don't have an offer, okay? Now an offer is very simple. You give away somebody free tickets, that's an offer. You're offering them something. Or whether you're charging something, no matter what, if you have a concept without an offer, it is absolutely pointless to have a concept, okay? So, well, that's great. Now I have a concept, now I have an offer. That's my call to action. But you know what? Everybody has those things. What really makes it possible for you to not have $1 million marketing budget to compete is relationships. Relationships are the key to the world. Okay? And how I know this is the case is because growing up in an Italian family, you realize the value of relationships, the good old boy system. Being Italian, I believe in low-hanging fruit, the barter system. I can go all day long with the things I learned from my Italian family, but no matter what, it all led back to the idea of relationships. Now, sometimes it's joint offers, sometimes it's partnerships, but no matter which way you look at it, relationships allow you to have the opportunity and the seat at the cool kids table. We were all back in school, we always wanted to sit at the cool kids table. But if you didn't have a relationship with a cool kid, you were on the opposite side of the cafeteria. So the truth of the matter is, this gets you far. And then it only, Jill next door, she's a publicity person. You know, I came from the world of public relations. And first thing that people do in public relations is they hire a publicist, right, or whatever the situation may be. They spend tons of money a month to get exposure, okay, get press, all this stuff. But the truth of the matter is, I don't believe in that anymore, okay? We were top 100 PR firms in the world, and I left it. And the reason why I left it is, I'm not in the business of making brands look better. I'm in the business of making people better, making brands better. Because it's far cheaper and far easier to do good things than it is to make it look like you are doing good things. That's a fact, okay? I see people spending millions of dollars a year just to look better, when the truth of the matter is, if they spent $100,000, flipped a neighborhood of homes and put some veterans in it, or served 500,000 kids meals, that pretty much solves the equation. But only after you have a concept, offer, and relationships identified, then is when you seek exposure. And exposure allows you to leverage all of the stuff that you're doing and actually get the appropriate press. Now, some of the people come to me and said, Chris, you're a $10,000 a month public relations person. I said, no, I'm not anymore, but you can pay me all the money in the world to get you exposure, but never, ever, ever attempt to get press or newsworthy things unless you have something newsworthy. I had a client of mine, big attorney, everybody in this room knows who he is, so I can't say his name because he would be embarrassed, but he went to a Justin Bieber concert, probably a 65-year-old man, and he wanted me to put a press release out that he was going to a Justin Bieber concert. Now, to me, that is the exact antithesis of the type of exposure you want, but it's ultimately boiled down to the fact that there was no concept there whatsoever. It was irrelevant, okay? So when you follow this order, and I'll kind of tie it into what I'm talking about today, I promise you will get results. And I'm going to show you guys some case studies today that absolutely prove this point, okay? So what are the challenges are in our country is we want to all do good things. Who in this room likes to do stuff for charity? Is there anybody in the room that does not like to do stuff for charity? Okay, so we're all on the same page here. But how many people here think that they have the ability to just stop making money in their business and dedicate their entire life to giving things to charity? Does anybody think they have that opportunity? All right then, because it will not work. But what people need to realize is, second in line behind the American government for GDP, in terms of overall money in the world, is the United States nonprofit organizations. So here we want to dedicate our life to this industry of nonprofits when they already have all of the money. Okay? What they don't have is the ability not to destroy what they're doing with the money. Prime example, Susan G. Komen. You guys know Susan G. Komen Foundation? They canceled most of their runs this year and their walks this year because last year they profited and they decided they wanted to give raises to all of the people that were at the administrative level. Now, I don't care who you are. There's no way in hell that you should be receiving $1 million plus salary being a nonprofit administrator. There's just no way. Just like I don't believe that you should be taking private planes going to events like this. The only time you should ever take a private plane is when it's filled with food and clothing and you're going over to Malawi, Africa, because without a private plane you can't land over there and bring that stuff in. That is the only time. So whenever you guys hear on these stages and people talk about glory and all the stuff that's going on, you don't listen to it, because when it doesn't resonate with your heart, I don't care what your mind says. I was in a speech not too long ago, and somebody was referencing at the front of the room how their son, who's in college, makes more money every month than their teachers make in the course of a year. So everybody says, yes, I want to do that too. And I'm in the back of the room writing down how in the hell I'm going to get teachers paid more in America. Okay, because that's the challenge that we face. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter anything. I can tell you right now, Bruno Strato's got one of the best restaurants on earth. He's given 500 plus thousand meals away to kids, motel kids in California. Nobody said he had to do that. He did it because he can. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. I don't know what happened here. Oh, it's asking me to join the internet. Not too interested. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay. So one of the biggest challenges we face in America is healthcare, right? And we're all entrepreneurs, is that fair to say? The lowest insured population in America is entrepreneurs. We know this, right? Okay, there are people in this room right now that don't have insurance. I promise you that. And one of the things is, that's all well and good, but there's also kids that don't have insurance, and our government is supposed to fix this, okay? In Illinois, we have this thing that if you're under the age of 18, you're kind of covered by the state. That doesn't really work. You're covered by the state if you want to wait in line for 2 days to get into the hospital and you want to get things done. But what people realize is one of the biggest burdens